Welcome to the Followup podcast. My name is Hayden. I am the worship director here at Arbor Church, and today I'm joined by Ryan Plants, our lead pastor, and Bryan Cobley, our students director and speaker from Sunday. We are in the second week of the series we're calling Better Together. First week was Grow Together.
Serve together.
Serve together.
Yep.
This week was...
Grow together.
Thank you, Bryan.
That's right.
And Bryan, you were the speaker. You got to talk about community, small groups, fill in the blank with whatever form of growing in a group together. Right off the bat, how different is the sermon prep for you from students on a Thursday night to a mixed congregation on a Sunday morning?
It's actually quite different. With students, maybe I should try harder for them. But
I'm taking notes. Yeah,
yeah,
sure,
thank
okay.
you. Yeah, right
Try
there.
harder,
Okay.
okay.
Try harder.
Yep, got it.
With the students, it's just a shorter message usually, and you can't really go as deep as you would like to go to with adults. And so with students, it's definitely more of a conversation with them while you're teaching them. And then there's a lot of stuff I would like to go deeper on conceptually, but it's just almost like a waste of time with them. Like it would be fun for me to bring into a message, but it doesn't really add to the condensed point that I try and do to students. While adults, it's like everything needs to be like thought out
Sure.
through transitions. That I think that's the hardest part for me when I write sermons for adults is how to write the transitions better to get from one point to the next without it feeling like just a complete
Grinding of the gears.
grinding gears.
Do you notice a difference in length of time preached for like a Sunday service compared to students, or do you go about the same time for both?
No, I go shorter for students,
Okay.
but sometimes I'll go over 20 minutes. But the sermon on Sunday, I honestly thought I went short.
Yeah.
But I think it was over 30 minutes. Can we check that?
I can look up on
Can
that.
the
actual
a
podcast.
research person? Can you?
Yeah, we're doing a little research. We've
Can
got
you check
some
that?
Well,
Check
I want to take Ryan's question and ask it in a different way.
3504.
35 minutes? Wow.
So Ryan's question in a different way: does Sunday morning feel like a marathon, or does Thursday nights just feel like, oh man, I'm trying to cram all this content into a short?
Do they
amount of
actually
time?
feel the same?
They feel the same.
They really
Okay.
feel the same. Yeah. Like it's really funny in Bible college, the professors would tell me that right now you're struggling trying to make a 30-minute sermon. Like you're in your mind, you're like, okay, how do I preach this for 30 minutes? Because there's going to be a point where you're up there and you're like, geez, how do I get this like to 30 minutes? I can go 40. And I think I finally have reached that point because I'm actually shocked it was 35 minutes. But even when I like went through it the first time before I preached, I was 4 pages in. I was at 15 minutes. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm talking really slow, I guess, which is not usually a problem for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
But on stage, I usually talk faster.
Yeah, you usually speed it up a little bit. The heart's running, the adrenaline's pumping. Yeah.
You try to get people to laugh and they don't laugh. You're like, okay, go through that faster.
Yeah. Keep driving. Keep moving. Yep.
So when you were given the assignment of grow together, this community groups kind of conversation, what was the first thing what was the first lead that you kind of followed for this message?
Actually, so when we talked about it as a staff, I was actually going to go a totally different direction than
Yeah, I think
what
the first thing
preached.
that you were going to jump on was the Psalms of Ascent.
Yeah, how like this community came together to worship together all the time, and I was kind of leaning more towards showing up for your community more in a sense together. But then as after we met as a staff, and then I just went to the whiteboard, I just kind of focused more on the Jesus side of it, and the Jesus side of it just led me into the us side of it by having him be the example, which is why I started with Jesus being our example of him embodying community with the Trinity, and then him building the community.
Yep.
And then I knew I wanted to use Acts 2, 40.
42 through 47.
Yeah, it's such a, I mean, it's the clear example of
There's a
community.
reason why when people preach on community, they go there so often. But yeah, I thought you handled that passage really well and connected it really well too. Yeah.
Well, because of that John 17 prayer, man.
That was
that
good.
John 17 prayer really helped me get there. That was the transition I was looking for.
I think it's been a good template for this series so far, and it was a bit unintentional. We knew the topics that we were going to be going through: serving, growing, and inviting. And it's been cool to see how God's orchestrated it so that essentially what we've been doing is just looking at Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
We spent 4 weeks looking at Jesus preaching on the Mount, and now we are looking at, what does it look like to embody a real like kingdom-minded community? And we've just been looking at Jesus.
Yeah.
I think we should have thought of that in advance. But like, of course, like where else would we look? But it's just interesting. I mean, I can't remember exactly what my process was for the serve together, but I'm sure it was something similar. I was like, well, maybe we'll go here, and I was like, oh, well, we'll look at Jesus first. Let's look at Jesus first.
Yeah,
and that's what we're going to be doing for this coming week too. But yeah, I loved how you looked at kind of how Jesus. What was it again? He embodied it. He built it. He prayed for it
for the
continuation, and then it continues through us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good.
Well, and what I appreciate about looking at Jesus, then looking at the early church with a framework in mind, is Jesus is clearly like the A+ example of this is what it looks like to the umpth degree, right? And then the early church is the practical, tangible, this is what it looks like to live out these principles. But I'm curious for the two of you, because you guys have been preaching in this series, is the challenge felt when you're putting this message together of here's the A+ example, here's an early example of what it looked like. Now, what does that look like for 2022 in Washington State in a less nomadic community and a more, I guess, we have a certain amount of financial and also just different responsibilities than the early church did. Obviously, their way of life and our way of life is night and day different. Did you guys feel that struggle of, all right, Jesus is almost an unapproachable example of what it means? The early church did it in their context. Now, how does that show up in our context? Is that something you guys struggled with in the sermon prep for these weeks?
It was definitely something I thought about because the early church, the fellowship of believers made sense because they had each other. Like it was what they were doing was somewhat illegal. And so they had each other. They literally needed each other.
Yeah.
To keep it going, which I think more in a mental health and I think in a sense, our common sense, we all know that we, need community, but it's not as dire as they needed for each other in this sense of they really needed each other to stay alive.
Well, and I wonder when you said it wasn't that dire, I wonder if the early church would look at us today and say, this is what it looks like if you don't have the community, Well,
yeah, and I think one thing that I believe Bryan and I talked about this past week was looking at that passage in Acts chapter 2 and imagining what that would look like and just kind of trying to put more color to those words and how they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the breaking of bread, and they shared everything. And even Bryan, you alluded to the subtitle in his translation was like the fellowship of the believers.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like something out of like the Lord of the Rings, right? And like here they are, and it's just this very idyllic, almost like picturesque thing. And I think that Luke, as he wrote that, was putting forth this kind of idealized version of what was happening, an aspirational community that we should move toward. But we were talking about, back then, people lived in such immediate proximity to one another. You didn't have like yards and commutes and big streets. I mean, people lived like on top of each other. And at this point, I don't believe it was so nomadic, but it was very much like urban density in which with which these people lived. There weren't vehicles that could transport you, 30 minutes from Monroe out here to Woodinville or, down from Bellevue up here, like up to Nineveh, right? Like you said. And so everyone was just so much more kind of closely intertwined that I do think a part of that community, like Bryan said, they needed each other. But there was also, I think, a natural, if I'm walking to go get whatever. I mean, I'm sure they made their own bread and all that stuff too. But if I'm walking to the marketplace to get something, there was a lot of like overlap in life. Whereas today, I think our big struggle in growing together is we are so self-sufficient, right? Like back then, I think built into the community was like an others dependency. And even more so for that group of early believers that were being persecuted. But now we're so self-sufficient that we don't really need each other. And I think that's a huge roadblock for us to really enjoy life together. So I'm wondering, like, how do we overcome those roadblocks? Like, what are steps we need to take?
So the one thing, I don't know if we could ever, thought on my mind, I don't think we could ever overcome being self-sufficient. But what we could do to even just combat it a little bit is invite people in. So like, I see this with my wife and her friends, and maybe it's just a girl thing, but my wife and her friend will always set up a day that they're going grocery shopping together.
Oh, wow.
Like just shopping together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never called up Hayden like, hey dude, I'm going to Costco today. You want to just go to Costco together?
Been waiting for that call.
Would you? But like on that thought process, like I don't need Hayden to go to Costco with me. But
and your wife probably doesn't need her friend to come either.
Yeah,
right?
But they have this sense of community with each other.
Wow, that's good.
And so like I don't know if we can combat being self-reliant, but I think we can do a better job inviting people in.
Well, I love that example. I mean, when we're talking about like actual concrete ways to like do life together, some of the ones you presented, which I think were great ones. Let's get together as a church community and devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching, right? The Jesus teaching, and let's break bread together. Let's be a part of groups. And I think those are things that we were challenged to. It was cool to see the response. In just the past 24 hours, so many more people signing up for groups, and seeing more and more people gathered here on Sunday mornings. It's been super exciting to see those things. But I mean, I think we all hunger for like a deeper connection with people, even beyond that. And so, like, there your wife is doing that awesome. But like, how would you guys respond if, like, on a Friday at 2 p.m., and Friday's our day off for those listening, if I was like, hey guys, I'm gonna head over to Safeway and go grocery shopping for some things for my family real quick. Do you guys want to join me?
So I'd recommend Winco because Safeway is super expensive. But
let's change it, because honestly, I feel like you're new. You're the lead pastor. This example a little skewed because you're like, okay, I guess we should.
I guess the boss is asking me.
I guess we gotta go to Safeway.
I guess the boss is asking me to go grocery shopping.
Let me ask you that if Hayden, Michael, Allison, or myself, we reached out to you like, hey man, I'm going to Safeway. I'm gonna go shopping. Do you want to come? Would you go? Because I feel like we'd be more inclined to say yes to that.
Okay. So if you were to flip it around, first of all, I'd be like, man, I've never been asked to go grocery shopping with someone else. But it is one of those mundane everyday activities that occupies at least an hour or two of everyone's week. And perhaps drawing someone else into that moment is just a really sweet, simple way to spend more time with someone in an environment that, like, usually you're by yourself, or maybe you're with your spouse. It's just very interesting. I think what it shows me is we do not lack for ways to connect with other people. The only thing that we're lacking in is our creativity or our imagination.
And here's the thing, even shopping, that's a funny example, because if I did go shopping with you and I'm like, gosh dang it, Ryan is an every aisle guy. And I'm never shopping with this man again.
And I am.
Are you in every aisle?
I'm not.
I've been shopping with my wife and her friends before, and she has friends that are like in every aisle, every like product they have to get their eyes on to see, do I need this one today? Yeah. So
wow.
Like it's hard because I bring that up example because if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right, you have to be okay with also a little bit of sacrifice and inconvenience. Because if I did invite you to go shopping with me, it's going to be a longer process than just us together with conversations. We're going to walk slower in the aisle than me just going directly towards the product that I'm going to get. But if you care about community, you do need to be willing to sacrifice and be just somewhat inconvenient.
Yes. Which brings up that Acts passage. And I think that this is the thing that resonated with me most from your message was in Acts 2 when you read through verses 42 through 47. And I've almost exclusively thought about this with respect to sharing of money. The idea that all the believers, this is in verse 44, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So I always thought in terms of, well, what would that look like in the church? And I thought about money. And I do think, here at Arbor, we give and we are able to help those in need through our benevolence fund. And that is happening in that actual practical sense. But you kind of phrased it in a little different way on Sunday. You touched on the monetary component, but you extended it a little bit,
Yeah, I
right?
talked about people's time as well, because I feel like in our world, our time has become more precious and more valuable than our money or possessions.
Yeah. And in a world where we're so self-sufficient, I think we're self-sufficient because we do live in a very abundant place. I mean, I'm sure like we all stress about how we're going to pay the bills and that kind of stuff in different ways. But comparatively speaking to 2,000 years ago or to a majority of the world right now, we live in a space of abundance. And so we are relatively self-reliant. But I think kind of going back into that example of asking someone to go grocery shopping with you or inviting people into those spaces and places where like you're usually doing it on your own because you're focused on the task. What you said was so true. We have to sacrifice something. In that moment, if I were to invite you guys to go to Safeway, or what was the grocery store you recommended?
Winco.
Winco?
Yeah.
Winco. If we were to go to one of those spots, it becomes a less efficient trip because you're grabbing stuff and I'm grabbing stuff and we're talking and we have to make sacrifices on the efficiency of my own space, my own time, getting the task done and inviting other people into those things. And I wonder, what are some other ways that we can make a sacrifice with my time, right? My efficiency, and invite other people into those things.
Yeah. And I think that for the female audience out there, we had men's breakfast on Saturday, and my brain goes to the analogy that you used of a stovetop, right? And there's only so much fuel. What?
That was the first time I heard that analogy.
Yeah, and there's only so much fuel that can go to each. Let's just call it a priority in your life, right? And I think that's the flip side of this, right? Of if I'm going to the grocery store alone and I'm able to get in and out in 7 to 10 minutes versus now I'm going to go to the grocery store for half an hour with Ryan and Bryan, there is some resources and time being pulled away from other priorities in your life. And I think that's one of the challenges of this sermon, right, is you're asking us, which is not a bad thing, to now put a priority on community, right? When so many of us also have families, jobs, and other things that kind of take place. You'd mentioned on at the men's breakfast, like health as well. There's so many areas, and I think that we have gotten to a place in our self-reliance and our self-sufficiency that community kind of takes the back burner, right? I think that's a challenge of we have to look at the priorities in our life, and are we saying that community is one of the top, 4 things on the stove? Based off of what we learned on Sunday in the passages, where would community line up in that order of priorities for the church, the early church in Acts?
Wow. I honestly think community would be up there. I wonder if they would even separate family and community.
Yeah, and I think that's also another distinction that might not be necessary.
I think for them, I think those two went hand in hand quite a bit.
And I think what you find in like New Testament studies at like first century is that people didn't live like just mom, dad, and their kids in a house.
Yeah.
There was a lot more people per household. A household wasn't like the quote unquote nuclear family. It was a lot broader than that. And so and beyond that, I think walls, I go home to my house and I pull up and I open the garage door and I park my car and I go in the house. You know what I mean? And I cannot see my neighbors if I don't want to see my neighbors.
Yeah.
But I think in that community back then, it just wasn't that wasn't the way it was. I mean, you were out in life with other people. Common spaces weren't just like your family's living room. It was like the neighborhood square.
Yeah.
Like that's where you spent time. I went to Turkey last August on a study tour, and a culture that's kind of closer geographically to that Middle Eastern culture.
Yeah.
And even to this day, I mean, we would drive around these like older villages, and people like would have like, like those really cheap plastic chairs that you have like sometimes outside in your backyard. They would just have those. They'd set them up around in a circle, and people would be like hanging out and just like connecting. And their living environment, they didn't have like homes, and it wasn't because they, I think, were impoverished. It was just like their style of living. It would be rural, and then there'd be apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And they would all just kind of be living in like these really close quarters. And I just think our culture is different than that. And I don't think that's necessarily bad.
No.
Unless we allow it to like isolate us from other people.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, I've never actually experienced this myself. just from what I've seen in movies and TV shows. But there are churches, kind of more rural churches or like Midwest churches, where it's like a whole like feast after church.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
all like cooking
Yep.
together, hanging out
Mhm.
together. Just we
Yeah.
call it potlucking, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if they'd call it a potluck. They'd probably just call it the after church meal. So I mean, it's not impossible.
No,
Mhm.
no.
Like and culturally for them, that's probably what they're
Mhm.
used to. Just
Totally.
us-
At the last church I was at, we had a monthly meal together, and I had a friend who was kind of helping us revive this church, and he's a Korean American professor at a university in the area, and he grew up in a Korean American church,
Mhm.
and they ate every Sunday. Like it was just part of the Sunday. Like he's like, church was 5 hours. You would go, you'd worship, you'd listen to the message, you would have Sunday school, you'd have this
Mhm.
big meal afterward, and like all the grandmas and moms would be cooking all this Korean food, and it was like a whole to do every single week. It was just their culture.
Mhm.
And I think we're so much more like independently minded people,
Uh-huh.
Americans, and that's just not part of our.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, tell me if you guys feel this, when you have the proposal of like engaging in a community kind of style event, do you ever feel like a sense of like resistance to it? Like if you have like a regularly scheduled group, like if you're part of a group and you're
Mhm.
like, oh, it's Tuesday night, it's group night, do you ever feel a sense of like, okay, got to do it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Sometimes I feel that way about a Sunday where I'm
Mhm.
like,
Sunday morning, even
I wake
yeah.
up like, oh, do I got to go to church?
Yes.
Yeah, you're preaching today.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, okay,
exactly.
I guess I'll go.
Exactly. But then, like, let me ask you this: like, how do you feel most of the time after?
Oh, amazing.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
like-
Yeah.
Right? Like, so good.
Yeah.
Like, your soul needed that, right?
Mhm.
But so I always struggle with if I'm an extrovert or introvert, and I'm pretty confident I'm an extrovert.
Okay.
But I also am a homebody,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so I have conflicting
Mhm.
like things that I love being around people. When I'm around people, I have a blast. It's always
Yeah.
fun. But I'm also when I'm home, I don't want to leave home. Home is like my sanctuary, and so when I get home and then somebody reaches out to me about, hey, you want to go do this? I'm like, should have asked me before
Yeah.
before I sat on my couch, man. I love my home.
Well, that's the question is, and I was thinking about this too, like the value of like
Mhm.
home, and like, why do I like to be at home and like be on my couch and like read a book and have like a good like 2 or 3 hour spot by I think that's fine and healthy and normal. But I do think that there might be for some of us like an overvalue of that space at home and the
Mhm.
comfort
Mhm.
and like what do I have to give in the home? Like
Mhm.
what do I have to sacrifice? Going back to that Acts 2,
Mhm.
44 and 45, like what am I giving?
Mhm.
Nothing. Like Lord willing not Lord willing, but like in my own mind, like Lord willing in this moment, like I have
Yeah.
undisturbed time for me.
Mhm.
That's again, I'm not saying that time that we shouldn't have that time and that it's like always selfish to do that,
Mhm.
but I do think it can devolve to a point where it's like we create an idol
Yeah.
out of
That's
that,
true.
right?
Yeah, I just love my home. It's hard.
Same.
So I'm in my Snuggie.
Yeah.
Like I'm just,
Mhm.
I don't really have a Snuggie, but I
Yeah.
just look
No, you
like-
do. I can see you with a Snuggie. Yeah. Can't you see Brian with a Snuggie?
Oh,
Hayden?
of course.
Yeah,
100%.
totally, yeah.
Little
Buy it.
49ers
Yeah, oh,
Snuggie.
yeah.
Yeah.
49er Snuggie. Nice. Okay.
No, but it really is. That one's a hard one for me. So I love hanging out with people. When I do, it's always fun. But when I've already like driven through the traffic to get to Lake Stevens
Mhm.
Mhm.
from work, Lake Stevens, someone's like, "Hey, you want to go hang out?" I'm like, I just got out of the traffic.
Sure. And
Mhm.
again, I mean, it's part of our cultural issue, right? In that, like back then, if you were like living in Jerusalem and someone's
Mhm.
like, they come and knock on your door and you want to hang out, like you got, you live on the same block,
Yeah.
Whereas like here, I remember, and I'll ask you guys, like, one of our sweetest times, Carrie and I, in community, was when we lived in the same neighborhood with so many of our friends
Mhm.
that we went to church with, and we were in a small group together,
Mhm.
and we could like literally walk a quarter mile, and
Yeah.
it would really be like they'd jump in our house and hang out for a couple hours, and we'd be on a neighborhood walk with our kids.
Mhm.
Our kids were so much younger back then, and we would do that. Like,
Yeah.
can you guys think about times in your life where like God really used community? And what did that look like? And what were some of the circumstances where there was like really, really joyful, kind of like
Yeah.
life-giving moments of community?
Well, I think that Bryan and I would differ on this, but for me, it was Bible college,
Mhm.
living in the dorms with. I know Bryan was never a dorm student; he was always off campus. But for me, like some of my closest friends in life, and to this day, like I still am in friendship and relationship with those people. Like just living a few doors down from people, always having someone to go do something with,
Mhm.
or even just, work on homework in the same room but not really talking.
Yeah.
Or like playing video games in different rooms in the same dorm and not really talking. Like there was just a community of we could do whatever, whenever. And, but I don't know if I've had that. I haven't had a neighborhood experience like that yet in my life. So,
No, and you'll discover I'm more of a loner. That I come across as. So in Bible college, I came in at 21 years old. So I was already like pretty much older than the majority of the.
You were like a grandfather.
That's how they all looked at me.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
But so I didn't live on campus, and I couldn't really afford Bible college even after the loans and the grants. So I had to work 7 days a week, 2 jobs, over 40 hours just to be able to.
Oh, wow. You had to walk uphill to both jobs.
Yeah,
both ways.
Barefoot. Wow, crazy.
But yeah, so I was working nonstop while I was at Bible college for those 3.5 years to even afford it.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get that community thing. I was trying to pay for that community thing.
Sure. So, okay. I mean, you found some of it, but you didn't have that kind of experience where someone can like go to school, they're taking like 15 hours of classes and kind of they're hanging out in the dorms and stuff like that.
I did my full-time school, and as soon as the class is done, I had to hop and drive to my job.
Yeah, so I think that actually brings up a question I had for you, Bryan, is what are some obstacles that you think people might face in our church at Arbor with respect to some of the challenges that you laid before them, coming to church on a regular basis on the weekends and being involved in a group, 2 really tangible things.
The number one, I think, those with family, kids sports have like taken over.
Yeah.
Like there's families whose kids do sports even like outside of the public school. So that traveling sport world, like we have a really wonderful family here. Where they have 5 kids, and I think the youngest is middle school.
Okay.
And they're all in sports.
Yeah.
So when we get a glimpse of them on Sunday, it's like the greatest thing. It's like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
there's one Sunday that finally.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when I would see like the husband, it's because the wife was doing the sports stuff, and then when I see the wife, it's because the husband was doing sports stuff. So that's the number one thing I see.
Sports and stuff.
Sports.
Yeah, as being an obstacle. Sure. How about you, Hayden? Have you seen any obstacles?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people find themselves in a community already in their life, or they might find themselves in a community here at Arbor or a church they've been a part of. And I think sometimes there's just a challenge of overlapping those communities, right? So like I might find myself in a really good groove with my neighborhood or my kids' sports leagues, or I might find myself very connected at Arbor and a challenge to bring those 2 worlds together.
Yeah.
Or a hesitancy of like, oh, I would love to be involved here at Arbor in this group or this community, but I've got these things going on these nights or these weekends. And I think that the challenge is, it's not to say as a follower of Jesus and a member here at Arbor that you have to pull yourself out of these, let's call them secular communities or just not church communities. It's how do you bring those together? Is that just inviting your sports league parents to church, or is that somehow figuring out a way to bring Arbor to those sports league parents and vice versa? Those are just examples. But I think the challenge is that there are people that are in really good community. It just might not be church affiliated, right? Or
yeah, and I would say, in that kind of situation, if those communities are propelling you to follow Jesus more closely, then more power to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think, I think churches have overstepped their boundaries in saying like they have to be our church sanctioned groups that you have to be involved in, you know? And I think that's an important thing to place as a caveat. I think if Arbor is your church home, we want to see you here worshiping together on Sundays because I do think that that's kind of like the epicenter of our life together. But with respect to groups, if people are already involved in a BSF group or some other kind of group where they're being spiritually fed and growing with Christ, and that again, more power to you. Don't add more to your plate and burn yourself out, emotionally and mentally for the sake of
spiritually.
Yeah, I mean, it would have a net negative effect, I think, ultimately.
I think another obstacle I've seen just Arbor and churches across the board is I think some people I know I experienced this as a staff member, that it's hard to go into the sanctuary and do the discipline of sitting down for the message. Like it's just as a staff member, we do it every single week.
Sure, yeah.
Sometimes, multiple times a week if you're involved in other stuff as well. That, you know, sometimes it can blend over to the people serving like crazy. That those who serve, they show up because they want to serve. They love the ministry that they're serving. But on the days that they're not serving, they choose to not even come for
to church,
to the church for the worship. It's like it's just the days that they serve when they come. So that one's like, if I had to challenge some of our members again, it would be like, can you show up on a day that you're really here to show up?
Yeah, and even if you don't like the preaching, you know, right? Like whether
Hayden does a good job.
Exactly. Even if you don't like it, I mean, what I found here at Arbor is the people are just absolutely wonderful, and it's just a gift to be able to come into a space like this, especially in a world that is so divided and there's so much antagonism and negativity. To be surrounded by people who really are just, I mean, I just feel like it's a gift to be able to come here every Sunday and be with the people that are here. I mean, when Carrie and I were praying through coming here to Arbor, one of the things that I think God just highlighted was like, this is a beautiful community, and there's some wonderful people here. And even if you don't want to, if you don't like the preaching or whatever, like, man, it's just some wonderful people to spend time with. So,
like
and man, I thought
sermon, people have come and helped me like every.
That's what I mean. It's really just wonderful. And so, I thought your message was really on point, and I was really challenged in particular by that. Like, what are the things that I need to give up? Because, and what I also loved was other people might need that thing. And for me, I thought my time. I just want to continue to be generous with my time and give that, because I can be stingy with that. I think in the same way, it's like I want that time at my house for my time off to rest, but in ways that are healthy. What are ways that I can give of that?
We can go golfing more.
Maybe I wonder what are some other ways that God might challenge me to give my time.
You met Gary, man.
That's right.
All right. Well, we are at our time. So is there anything else before we close out the podcast?
Nope. Sign up for groups. arborchurch.com/groups.
Nice.
I think they're almost all full. Allison just walked in the room. I think there are only a few spaces left, right?
Also commit to every Sunday for the Philippians series that we're going to start here in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. We're starting Philippians. Maybe read ahead, read through the letter a few times. And get prepared for that series. It's going to be awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for talking about the message, and thank you to anyone who watched or listened, and we will see you guys next week.
See you next week.